I was trapped alone in a stalled elevator, 30 floors up. The lights flickered, then died, and panic crawled up my throat. A voice crackled through the intercom, calm and steady. "Hang on," she said. "I'm coming for you." 40 minutes later, the doors opened to reveal her face. I fell for a stranger before I even knew her name. 3 months later, she vanished without a single word. What I didn't know was who had made her disappear. My name is Claire Donovan, 29. A junior architect at a mid-size firm in downtown Chicago, chasing a promotion I thought would define my whole life. I never expected an ordinary Tuesday evening, stuck between the 22nd and 23rd floors, to become the night everything quietly changed direction for me. The elevator lurched, groaned, and stopped dead, throwing me against the cold steel wall in total darkness. I pressed the emergency button until my thumb ached, my breath coming fast and shallow in the sealed metal box. "Building maintenance." "I hear you," a woman's voice said through the speaker, low and unhurried, like she had all the time in the world. "My name's Jordan. I'm an elevator technician. I'm already on my way up the service shaft." "Okay. Just breathe with me." I laughed, half from relief and half from nerves, surprised that a stranger's voice could steady my shaking hand so quickly. She talked to me the entire time, asking about my day, my job, anything to keep my mind off the dark, cramped space around me. When the doors finally split open, emergency lights flooded in, and I saw her kneeling there in a navy work jumpsuit, flashlight in hand. Jordan Reyes had dark curly hair pulled back under a cap, calloused hands, and eyes that crinkled when she smiled like she meant it. "There she is," Jordan said, reaching to help me climb out onto solid ground. "Claire, right? Dispatch told me your name." I nodded, embarrassed by how grateful I felt just to see another human face after 40 minutes trapped alone in silence. "You handled that better than most people twice your size," she told me, checking my pulse at my wrist out of habit. I noticed her hands didn't let go right away, and neither of us mentioned it, though I felt my face grow warm. "I owe you a coffee," I said before I could stop myself, surprised at my own boldness in front of a total stranger. Jordan grinned and pulled a battered business card from her chest pocket. "I never say no to free coffee. Claire Donovan." That week I found myself rereading her card more times than I wanted to admit, tracing the small embossed elevator logo with my thumb. I told myself it was simple gratitude, nothing more, the kind of thing anyone would feel toward someone who rescued them. But when I finally texted her, my hands were trembling in a way gratitude alone had never made them tremble before. We met at a small diner near the Loop, and she showed up in jeans and an old band t-shirt, hair loose for once. "You clean up nice," I said, and she laughed, telling me the jumpsuit wasn't exactly her preferred first date outfit either. "Is this a date?" she asked, tilting her head, and I realized neither of us had actually said the word out loud yet. I stared at my coffee cup for a long moment before admitting, quietly, that I hoped it was. She wanted it to be. Jordan reached across the table and squeezed my hand once, briefly, like she was testing whether I'd pull away. I didn't pull away, and something in her shoulders relaxed, as if she'd been bracing for rejection the whole conversation. That night ended with 2 hours of talking that felt like 20 minutes, and neither of us wanted to be the one to leave first. I hadn't dated anyone seriously in over a year. Not since my last relationship with a man named Mark quietly fell apart. I had never let myself consider that the reason it fell apart might have less to do with Mark and more to do with me. Sitting across from Jordan, watching her laugh with her whole face, I finally understood the difference between comfortable and truly, electrically alive. We started seeing each other twice a week, then 3 times, our schedules bending around each other without either of us asking. Jordan told me about growing up in a working-class neighborhood on the South Side, the only girl among 4 brothers, fixing bikes before she fixed elevators. I told her about growing up in the suburbs, my mother's strict expectations, and the tidy 5-year plan I'd been handed since childhood. "Does architecture make you happy?" Jordan asked one night. "Or does it just make your mother proud?" I didn't have an answer ready. She had a way of asking questions that cracked something open in me, gently, without ever pushing too hard for an answer. The first time she kissed me was on the river walk, city lights trembling on the water, her hand warm against my jaw. I kissed her back before my mind could catch up with what my heart had already decided weeks earlier. "I've wanted to do that since the elevator," she admitted, forehead resting against mine, both of us grinning like teenagers. I told her I'd wanted it too, though I hadn't let myself name the feeling until that exact moment on the water. Falling for Jordan felt different from anything I'd known before. Less like falling and more like finally standing up straight. She met me after work sometimes, waiting outside my building in her truck with 2 coffees and sawdust still on her sleeves. My coworkers noticed the extra lightness in my step, teasing me about a secret admirer I wasn't ready to name yet. I found myself smiling at my phone during meetings, rereading her texts, feeling 16 years old again in the best possible way. Jordan took me to her favorite diner in Pilsen, introduced me to the owner as someone important, and I felt my chest tighten with warmth. I hadn't told my family about her yet, and the longer I waited, the heavier that silence sat in my stomach. My mother called every Sunday, always circling back to Mark, asking if we might reconcile, if there was still a chance. "There's someone else," I finally told her one Sunday, my voice smaller than I intended it to be. "Oh," my mother said, brightening. "What's his name?" I let the silence stretch too long before answering her. "Her name is Jordan," I said, and the line went quiet in a way that made my stomach drop instantly. "I have to go," my mother said, and the call ended before I could explain anything further to her. I sat on my kitchen floor for 20 minutes afterward, phone in my lap, waiting for a callback that never came that night. When I told Jordan what happened, she didn't flinch, just wrapped an arm around me and let me cry into her shoulder. "Families take time," she said softly, though I noticed a flicker of old pain cross her own face as she said it. Weeks passed without a word from my mother, and each unanswered text felt like a small stone added to my chest. My younger sister Beth finally called, whispering that Mom had cried for 2 days and refused to say why to anyone. "She'll come around," Beth said, though her voice carried more hope than certainty, and I appreciated the gesture anyway. At work, a colleague named Vanessa began asking pointed questions about my roommate, smiling in a way that felt more calculating than curious. I brushed it off, telling myself Vanessa was simply nosy, not realizing how carefully she was filing the information away. Jordan, meanwhile, was fighting her own battle at work, reporting a building manager who'd been skipping required elevator safety inspections for months. "If something goes wrong and someone gets hurt, that's on my license," she told me, jaw tight, refusing to stay quiet about it. The building manager, a man named Curtis Hale, denied everything and quietly began complaining to Jordan's supervisor about her attitude instead. I watched her come home some nights exhausted, caught between doing the right thing and protecting the job that paid her bills. "You didn't do anything wrong," I reminded her, holding her hands the way she once held mine in that dark elevator. She smiled, but I could see the worry sitting behind her eyes, the fear that honesty might cost her everything she'd built. My mother finally called on a Thursday night, her voice tight and formal, asking to meet for coffee, just the 2 of us. I arrived early, my hands cold despite the warm mug in front of me, bracing myself for whatever she needed to say. "I had a sister," my mother said abruptly, staring at the table instead of at me. "Her name was Ruth." I sat frozen, having never once heard my mother mention a sister in 29 years of my entire life. "She loved a woman named Patricia," my mother continued, voice cracking. "My parents disowned her. I never saw her again." My mother's hands trembled around her cup as she admitted she'd spent 30 years too afraid to ask her own family why. I was scared, she whispered. That loving you the way I do would mean losing you the same way I lost Ruth. I reached across the table and took her hand, understanding for the first time that her fear had never truly been about me. I'm not going anywhere, I told her. But I need you to actually try. Mom, I can't build my life around your fear. She nodded, tears slipping down her face. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something like hope return to my chest. It wasn't forgiveness yet. Not fully. But it was a door cracked open where before there had only been a locked wall. I told Jordan about the conversation that night. And she listened quietly, squeezing my hand tighter with every new detail I shared. That took real courage, she said. From both of you, and I realized how much I needed to hear exactly that. For a few weeks, life felt almost easy. My mother texting small updates. Jordan's work troubles quieting down. Our routine settling into something steady. Then Vanessa cornered me by the copier one afternoon, smiling too sweetly, asking if I'd finally decided to be honest with the team. Word travels, she said lightly, especially in a firm this small, and my stomach dropped straight through the floor beneath me. I confronted her directly, asking exactly what she meant, and she shrugged, claiming she'd simply mentioned it to a few people. By the next morning, half the office seemed to know, whispers trailing behind me down the hallway like a cold draft. My supervisor called me into his office, not unkindly, but with careful, measured words about keeping personal matters separate from professional ones. I left that meeting shaking, unsure whether I'd just been warned, threatened, or quietly told my promotion was no longer guaranteed. That night I learned Vanessa had been up for the same promotion, and suddenly her sudden interest in my personal life made painful sense. She used you to get ahead, Jordan said angrily, pacing our small apartment, and the firm let her get away with it. I felt smaller than I had in months, wondering if I'd have to choose between honesty and everything I'd worked so hard for. Meanwhile, Curtis Hale escalated his complaints against Jordan, twisting her safety report into a story about insubordination and poor attitude toward management. Jordan came home one evening pale and quiet, telling me the company had placed her on unpaid leave pending an internal investigation. They're punishing me for telling the truth, she said, voice hollow, staring at the termination letter she'd received that afternoon. I held her that night while she cried for the first time since I'd known her, all her usual steadiness finally cracking. We'll figure this out together, I promised, though privately I wondered how much more either of us could realistically absorb right now. Within the same week, my mother called again, this time to say my father wanted to meet Jordan properly, over Sunday dinner. The timing felt cruel, asking Jordan to smile through a family dinner while her career quietly crumbled behind the scenes. I want to go, Jordan insisted. Your family matters. Even now, and I loved her fiercely for choosing me despite everything else. Sunday dinner was tense at first, my father asking careful questions, my mother hovering nervously between the kitchen and the table. Slowly, though, Jordan won my father over by fixing the sticking hinge on the back door before dessert was even served. Practical, my father said approvingly, and I saw my mother's shoulders finally loosen for the first time all evening. Driving home, Jordan admitted she'd been terrified the entire dinner, more scared of my parents than of any elevator repair job. You did great, I told her, and meant it completely, grateful for one bright evening amidst so much surrounding uncertainty. The next morning, Jordan received a call from a rival elevator company in Seattle, offering her a senior technician position immediately. It's a real opportunity, she said carefully, not quite meeting my eyes, especially with everything falling apart here in Chicago. I felt the ground tilt beneath me, understanding that her career and our relationship had suddenly become opposing forces pulling apart. Take it, I said, forcing steadiness into my voice, though inside I felt something quietly starting to unravel between us. I don't want to leave you, she said, But I don't know what's left for me here anymore. Professionally or otherwise. We didn't fight. Not exactly. But a careful distance crept into our conversations, both of us avoiding the real question underneath. My promotion decision loomed the same week. My supervisor hinting that team perception would factor heavily into the final choice. I realized, with sudden clarity, that I was tired of shrinking myself smaller to fit into other people's comfort zones. At the promotion review meeting, I spoke plainly about my safety concerns regarding a building project Vanessa had quietly cut corners on. It turned out Vanessa's rushed timeline had skipped a structural review, the same kind of corner-cutting Jordan had fought against at her own job. The firm's partners were furious, not at me, but at Vanessa, whose ambition had nearly caused a serious safety failure downtown. I got the promotion, not because of gossip or personal drama, but because I'd refused to stay silent when it actually mattered. Vanessa was quietly let go within the month, and the office gossip about my personal life evaporated almost overnight after that. I called Jordan immediately, breathless with the news, only to hear hesitation in her voice instead of celebration. I already told Seattle yes, she admitted quietly. I start in 3 weeks. I didn't know how to tell you. The words landed like a physical blow, and for a long moment neither of us said anything at all. When were you going to tell me? Asked, hurt bleeding into every syllable despite my effort to stay calm. I was scared, she admitted, that if I said it out loud, you'd ask me to choose. And I didn't know what I'd choose. I hung up gently, needing space to think, and spent that night staring at the ceiling instead of sleeping. My mother, of all people, called the next morning, asking gently what was wrong, worry evident in her careful tone. I told her everything, and for once she simply listened. No judgment, no old fears. Just a mother comforting her daughter. Your Aunt Ruth once told me, she said quietly, that love worth keeping is worth fighting for, even when it's frightening. I wish I'd listened to her sooner, my mother added, and I heard real regret woven through every word she spoke. Jordan texted that afternoon, asking to meet at the same diner where we'd had our very first almost 8 months earlier. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, twisting a napkin between her fingers before she could even speak. I turned down Seattle, she said finally. This morning. Before you even called. I couldn't imagine my life without you in it. Relief crashed through me, followed quickly by fear. Because turning down Seattle meant she still had no job at all. What will you do now? Asked, and she admitted, honestly, that she genuinely didn't know yet, only that leaving felt wrong. We'll figure it out, I said, echoing her own words back to her from weeks before. Together. Whatever it takes. 2 days later, Curtis Hale's negligence caused an actual elevator malfunction in another building, injuring a maintenance worker on the 4th floor. The incident triggered an official investigation, and Jordan's original safety report surfaced as proof she had warned management months earlier. The elevator company quietly reversed her termination, offering reinstatement along with a formal apology and back pay for the lost weeks. I told the truth and it almost cost me everything, Jordan said. But in the end, it also saved me. We celebrated quietly that night, just the two of us. Relief washing over both of us for the first time in months. Life began settling into something steadier. Jordan back at work. My promotion official. My mother slowly rebuilding an actual relationship with me. Then, unexpectedly, my mother invited Jordan and me to a family reunion, the first in over a decade, at my grandmother's old farmhouse. Are you sure? Asked, knowing my grandmother's generation held views closer to the ones that had once exiled Aunt Ruth. I'm sure, my mother said firmly. I lost one daughter to silence. I won't lose another the same way. We drove out together, Jordan gripping the steering wheel a little too tightly, both of us nervous about what awaited us there. My grandmother, now in her 80s, studied Jordan for a long moment before simply asking her to help carry the potato salad inside. It wasn't a grand acceptance speech, but it was something. A small ordinary gesture that felt enormous given everything behind it. Later that evening, my grandmother pulled me aside, admitting quietly that turning away Ruth remained the greatest regret of her entire life. "I won't make that mistake twice," she said, voice unsteady. And I hugged her tighter than I had in years. Driving home that night, Jordan reached over and laced her fingers through mine. Both of us quiet. Both of us relieved. "I didn't think today would go that well," she admitted. And I told her neither had I. Honestly, not even a little. A month later, Jordan proposed the idea of moving in together, half joking that her lease was ending and my apartment had better light anyway. I said yes before she even finished the sentence, laughing at how quickly certainty had replaced all my earlier fear. We found a small apartment near the Riverwalk, close to the exact spot where she'd first kissed me under the city lights. Moving day was chaotic. Boxes everywhere. Jordan's brothers helping haul furniture up 3 flights of stairs, teasing her the entire time. My mother showed up with homemade lasagna, staying to help unpack dishes, chatting easily with Jordan like they'd known each other for years. Watching them together, I realized how far we'd both come from that tense, silent phone call months earlier about Mark. At work, my new position gave me authority to push for stricter safety standards on every project, honoring what Jordan had once fought for. Jordan, meanwhile, was promoted to lead technician, training new hires and speaking at safety seminars across the greater Chicago area. We built a life together quietly, deliberately, choosing honesty over comfort in every difficult moment that came our way. One evening, Beth called excitedly, admitting she'd told her college roommate about Jordan and me, unprompted. Simply proud of her sister. "You made it easier," Beth said, "for me to be honest about my own life too." And she came out to me as bisexual that same call. I hadn't expected my own choices to ripple outward like that, giving my sister language and courage she hadn't had before. Jordan and I started volunteering together at a local LGBTQ youth center, mentoring teenagers navigating the same fears we once carried alone. One teenager there reminded me painfully of myself at that age, terrified of disappointing a mother who loved conditionally out of fear. I told her my own story, careful and honest, hoping it might make her path slightly less lonely than mine had been. "Did it get better?" she asked. And I told her the truth. Not easily, not quickly, but yes, eventually, it truly did. On our 1-year anniversary of that fateful elevator ride, Jordan surprised me by requesting we ride that exact elevator together. Just once. The building manager, new since Curtis Hale's dismissal, let us in after hours, curious about the strange, sentimental request. Standing in that same metal box, doors closing, I felt none of the old panic, only warmth. Only Jordan's steady hand in mine. "Best rescue of my entire career," Jordan joked. And I told her it was the best rescue of my entire life instead. Between the 22nd and 23rd floors, she got down on one knee. Right there. A small velvet box in her trembling hand. "Marry me," she said simply. "Right here. Where it all started. If you'll have me for the rest of our lives." I said yes before the elevator doors even opened again, laughing and crying at the same time, completely overwhelmed with joy. We told my parents together that weekend, and my mother cried happy tears this time, holding both our hands tightly across the table. My grandmother insisted on hosting the wedding at the farmhouse, declaring it was time the family celebrated love instead of fearing it. Jordan's brothers built a small wooden arch for the ceremony, carving both our initials quietly into the underside where only we would ever know. We planned a small wedding, just family and close friends, exactly the kind of honest, unhidden celebration neither of us had once dared imagine. My mother asked if she could say a few words during the ceremony, and I agreed, curious what she might possibly say. On the wedding day, standing beneath that carved wooden arch, my mother spoke about her sister Ruth for the very first time publicly. I couldn't give my sister the wedding she deserved, she said, voice breaking. But today, I get to give my daughter hers instead. There wasn't a dry eye left in the small crowd gathered across my grandmother's sunlit backyard that warm September afternoon. Jordan wore a simple navy suit, the same shade as the jumpsuit she'd worn the night we first met, and I noticed immediately. I wanted you to recognize me, she whispered as I walked toward her, and I told her I would recognize her absolutely anywhere. We exchanged vows we'd written ourselves, mine about courage learned slowly, hers about steadiness offered freely, both of us laughing through happy tears. My father walked me partway down the makeshift aisle, then stepped back, letting my mother finish the walk beside me instead. Felt symbolic somehow. Both my parents finally standing fully beside the daughter they'd once struggled so hard to understand. After the ceremony, my grandmother pulled out an old photograph of Ruth and Patricia, one she'd kept hidden for nearly 40 years. They would have loved this day, she said, setting the photograph gently on our gift table beside the wedding cake. Jordan and I danced our first dance to a slow, unfamiliar song her father had chosen, one Ruth had apparently once loved dancing to. Learning that small detail felt like closing a circle neither of us had realized needed closing until that exact moment. Later that night, exhausted and happy, Jordan and I sat on the farmhouse porch swing, watching fireflies drift across the dark yard. Any regrets? She asked quietly, resting her head against my shoulder. Watching the same stars we'd once watched from a city rooftop. Only that it took me 29 years to get stuck in an elevator, I said, and she laughed, pulling me closer against the evening chill. We talked about the future that night, tentative plans for a house, maybe children someday, a life built slowly and honestly together. I thought about the frightened woman I'd been that first night, trapped in the dark, unsure if anyone was coming for her. Someone had come, eventually. Not just to fix an elevator, but to help me finally step fully into my own honest life. I fell in love with Jordan Reyes the night she saved me from being stuck between two floors, alone in the dark. What I found waiting on the other side of that door was a whole life I'd been too afraid to claim before. Fendi.